Chase McGrath for the win for the Volunteers. From 40. On the way, a knuckleball. He got it! And here they come.
What's up, y'all? Welcome into the GoVols247 Podcast. Wes Rucker coming to you from Fort Rucker Studio here on a beautiful Thursday morning in God's own Knoxville, Tennessee. Chamber of Commerce morning, you could say. I think it is that beautiful this morning. A nice 70 degrees. How are you? Hope you're well. Hope everything in your life is going great. Hope you've had a good week. Hope you got a good weekend planned ahead of you. If you're going to Norman, Oklahoma, I hope you are having a safe travel on the way over there, whether you are flying into OKC or whether you are driving, like just getting in the car, making a family trip or a buds trip out of it. No matter what you're doing, no matter how you're getting there, if you're going, I hope you do that safely. Hope everything in your work week has been good. I hope you've been able to get some work done. Hopefully you've not just focused entirely on the Tennessee-Oklahoma game and shunned everything else in your life. I hope you've got your other responsibilities lined up. Hope everything is going to go well for you this weekend. And to talk about that game this weekend, I'm going to go clockwise on my screen here. I got Ben McKee at his home studio. I got Patrick Brown down there at his undisclosed location. And I got Ryan Callahan from his home dungeon daycare center. But I got to tell you right now, it kind of looks like Ryan and Ben are almost in the same room based on what I'm looking at here. So they could be. They could be in the same room, so I don't know. This is like a Hollywood Squares type of thing or whatever. But fellas, how we doing this morning?
Doing well. Excited for Saturday night, and very thankful that Ryan and I are not in the same room right now.
Same here. Glad I get to stay home this weekend while you guys travel to Oklahoma and deal with all the stuff that Wes is mentally reminding himself to do as we start this podcast.
Yeah, basically.
I'm a little annoyed that Ben always gets introduced first.
Well, I think it's because I'm not sure, but I think it's because Ben logged into the room faster, and so it basically goes in order that people.
Now you're gonna give him a chance to brag about how he's not late.
Well, I don't think you were late necessarily. I mean, you got into the room in an acceptable period of time.
I was fashionably late.
Fashionably late, but not like the dinner's getting cold late. You know what I mean? Like you were there late. Yeah, when Ryan showed up, like we had already given up and eaten our cold dinner angrily, and then we ate our dessert, and then Ryan showed up. He's like, "Hey guys, what's cooking?" You know, that's I think that's what we did. But we got a lot of fun stuff to discuss on this episode. We got an injury report on Wednesday night. There's some fresh news for you for the first time in history. Well, I say first time in history. This is what Philip Fulmer used to do, like on Thursdays or Fridays. But after that practice on Thursday, he would walk out there with a sheet of paper and basically do this. So he was a trailblazer, I guess, in his time. But now the SEC mandates for league play that every Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, and then 90 minutes before kickoff, you go out there and you release an injury report. Patrick, since you wrote that, I'll give the floor to you here. What was on Tennessee's injury report? And I'm going to have an injury report jingle. So hopefully by next week or so, when we're recording these, I'll have an injury report update, like Pat in his helicopter giving us traffic updates.
Yeah. And then I can do a traffic style voice. There were 7 players listed on the Tennessee. They're called availability reports, technically. Oh, okay. We don't have to call them that on the air, but
that's a healthy way
for grading purposes. That's what they're called. Probably the biggest one is that Lance Hurd, Tennessee starting left tackle, is listed as questionable. Obviously, he was held out last week against Kent State. I asked Josh Heupel at the end of his post-game press conference about that, and he said that we had a couple of guys tonight that could have gone just for the longevity of the season. We held them out tonight. He didn't really mention Hurd specifically, but I think he's dealing with an ankle deal. And I'm not surprised he was listed on the availability report. I'm not really surprised he was questionable either. So my guess is he will continue to be questionable. Now, the protocols for this is new territory for myself and everybody. So they're going to post these initially on Wednesday nights at 8:15. And then they will post updates on them. If there are updates, I think they will, again, we'll see what it looks like on Thursday night, but they will post updates. So guys can be quote unquote upgraded. They can be quote unquote downgraded. They will do that Thursday night around the same time, Friday night around the same time. And then there is a final game day listing where they can be listed. I think it's 90 minutes before kickoff. So on Saturday night, it'll be at 6 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock local time in Oklahoma, I guess, where you can list a player as available or a game time decision, at which point we will probably be looking at them in warmups. So, and seeing if they are going through warmups, or in this case, if they made the trip, because there's obviously the travel roster part of it too. So, if there is a chance Hurd for whatever reason can't go and they don't bring him at all, I suppose Friday night we could get the mention that he's out, but this is all still up in the air. The other players, William Satterwhite, the backup center, listed as probable. A couple of walk-ons, linebacker Ben Bolton and William Wright listed as probable as well. And then they listed 3 players as out. Jordan Thomas is one of them. He obviously is out for the season. And then 2, I guess, new ones. Safety John Slaughter, who has played extensively on special teams. He is out for this game.
Yeah.
As is Sham Umarov, the offensive lineman, the backup guard who got hurt last week. So not really any surprises there, but I think the big headline one is that Lance Hurd is iffy for this game at this point, and we'll see what the updates show throughout the week. But this is, I like this. I know, we had a lively talk about it during the in our work group thread about the validity of this now, and there were some people too that were like, "Oh, this is just gamesmanship with Hurd." There are punishments if you fudge this too much. So. And I know athletic directors aren't going to want to be having to pay.
Yeah, I think we were having a little bit of a tech issue with Pat there. So what I'm going to do is,
no tech issue.
I think. Hold on. We were having a little bit of a tech issue there. I'm going to go ahead and until we get this thing smoothed back out, I'm going to talk over you apologetically, obviously, but I would say that Slaughter is obviously the second biggest name on there for me anyway, because he's one of Mike Eckler's dogs. He kind of plays on all the special teams units. That's a big one. Umarov is a guy who I don't know that he would play much in a close game. He might be on some PAT teams or something like that. He's an athletic enough lineman. He could be on some teams, but basically, Hurd would be the big one. And that is questionable is technically 50-50 or thereabouts. Like I think they list probable as 75% chance of playing and questionable as 50-50. And then doubtful, obviously we all know what that means. And then out, we all know what that means. So that's the verbiage that is used on the report anyway.
Yeah,
for me, Patrick, the only one that I was kind of surprised by was Lance Hurd himself, and to me, that is the one that is probably the most concerning for Tennessee as well, because he's your starting left tackle and protecting Nico's blind side. But I think that one's more probable than questionable, so that is why I say that one was a little more surprising than anybody else on there.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, the initial word you got over the weekend sounded like Lance Hurd's absence during the Kent State game wasn't a big deal, that he would probably be fine and just sort of, could have even played in that game, but was being held out as a precaution. But, I'm not so sure that's an exact reflection of where things stand, but regardless, it is an interesting inclusion on the injury report this week, and we'll see where things go from here. But it's like Patrick said, I think his status is maybe a little more in question than we initially would have thought, Saturday night. And, it's at least something to throw some intrigue in here because, obviously Tennessee's got Dane Davis they could fall back on if Lance Hurd couldn't play, but wouldn't be an ideal situation to have to go into Oklahoma and your biggest test so far in one of the 3 big games on Tennessee's schedule and not have your starting left tackle there. That obviously was a highly anticipated transfer addition that it only has played a couple games so far.
Yeah, and Oklahoma's got some dudes up front. Now, Oklahoma's not played great as a team yet this season, but that Oklahoma defense has for the most part been pretty solid, and they got a couple dudes up front that could really give you a hard time. So that would be, they'd like to have Hurd obviously in this game. Say what you will about last week in Kent State, and we saw what that game was. They could have played anybody there, really, and they'd have been okay. But this should be a different deal. Like you'd rather have your guy here. But I also, to Ben's point earlier, heard about Hurd that they felt pretty good, not like for sure, but like they felt pretty good about it. So I would have thought probable too, but questionable is fine because that's 50-50. And if you're not sure, then you could say 50-50. Like there's nothing wrong about that because they probably are like, well, not really sure. I think we're all kind of going trial and error on this, right? I mean, all the coaches are trying to figure out what exactly this means.
Yeah, it kind of goes to the art of the injury report, and we'll have to kind of just wait and see what Tennessee's pattern on this is. But you have some teams like the Patriots under Bill Belichick who for years would not list anyone as anything but questionable, basically, unless it was a pretty rare situation. So you're either going to be...
They listed Brady every week for like his career as Tom Brady shoulder questionable or something like his whole career. They listed that.
So there's a different interpretation of questionable for almost every team in the league if you get kind of up to speed on how they do things. So we'll just kind of have to see what Tennessee's pattern here is. I would imagine we're probably going to see a lot of questionable, if just knowing Josh Heupel's approach to talking about injuries, but we'll just have to see about that. And whether they update these throughout the week too will be interesting because if you're not sure about a guy Wednesday, but by Friday it looks like he's going to play, then maybe you switch it to probable or something. But we might not see changes like that from Tennessee much throughout the week.
My guess is that they will continue to list Hurd as questionable the next 2 days, and then probably even have him as a game time decision. That would be my guess. But I mean, as I was saying before my alleged tech issues, you can fudge these a little bit, but you can get fined by the SEC. And I know athletic directors around the country or around the league are not going to want to pay $25,000 and then escalating for other offenses because of some chicanery with the injury reports. I know Danny White's not going to want to, given that he just hiked ticket prices. So he probably doesn't want to have to, level another check to the SEC office. But and I do think we also need to point out that some of the guys that did not play last week are not on it at all. Cam Selden, and then both the Leos, Caleb Herring and Jordan Ross, that were ruled out in pregame against Kent State. Neither of those guys are on it. So none of those guys are on it now. There have been some late week changes. I think last week, for Texas A&M before they played at Florida, Connor Wegman was not on their Wednesday night report, and then he was added Thursday, and he wound up not playing. So it's sort of a new world, and it makes I enjoyed it. I mean, I was hitting refresh from about 8 to 8:15 on Wednesday night. Probably doing the same on Thursday night, and so forth, just to because it's news, it's developments. I mean, if somebody gets upgraded or downgraded or added, that's a development, that's discussion. There is going to still be a level of unclarity, I guess. That's or what I'm saying, uncertainty, I guess, with how these things are, just because we don't see practice during the week. We don't see how much so and so is doing, and so there's still going to be a little bit of uncertainty, Ben, throughout the week with these, but it beats A, not getting any updates at all, and B, asking Josh Heupel about Cedric Tillman 2 weeks after his ankle surgery and be like, yeah, he might play this week. Like, no, he's not.
He might. Yeah, we'll see a little bit later in the week.
And there will be coaches that are more forthcoming within these rules. Like Sam Pittman on the SEC teleconference was practically already given his injury update yesterday morning. So there will be coaches that give more than Josh Heupel will, and I don't think either coach, one that is more forthcoming or one that is less forthcoming. I don't think any coach is wrong for the method that they choose unless they are just straight lying through their teeth. And I think that's what this mostly eliminates, is just the flat out lies and deception. But I'm sure there will be ways that coaches can beat around the bush. I guess I'm getting at it. And I'm sure Tennessee will be one of the programs that beats around the bush more than most, more than others. And like, I would probably do the same thing if I was in charge, quite frankly. But Wes, Ryan, one thing that I wanted to know on the injury report, I thought more of the storylines were with Oklahoma on Wednesday night when the availability report came out. Lance Hurd, certainly a big-time storyline, maybe the most noteworthy player on either availability report, given the position that he plays.
Yeah.
But Oklahoma is a more banged up football team than Tennessee is, and they had several guys listed as probable. Nick Anderson, their star receiver, their wide receiver one coming into the year, he has not yet played this year.
Yeah.
After a terrific redshirt freshman season, he was listed as probable. Andrew Anthony, another receiver, listed as probable. So they have two receivers listed as probable as of Wednesday evening, and that's for a receiver room for Oklahoma that has been banged up through these first couple of weeks of the season. Their Cheetah, which is an awesome name for their star position, their nickel position, Kendall Dolby, he was also listed as probable, and then Troy Everett, an offensive lineman, a projected starting offensive lineman. I believe right tackle, Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong. He has not played this season due to a knee injury in the spring, and he underwent surgery in April. All four of those players were listed as probable. So the storyline for me was more about Oklahoma on Wednesday night and them just becoming healthier. And I don't think it's going to work out this way, but Oklahoma fans and I'm sure the Oklahoma team is hoping that that's going to solve a lot of their issues on offense.
I think Everett was going to be their center, Ben. I'll have to double check. And then they brought in Branson Hickman, who was like an all-conference player at SMU. I think he's on the injury report too. He's been banged up. I think they had him listed as questionable. But Everett was going to be their center. And I think he got hurt in the spring. Let me double check that first, though.
While you're saying that, I will say that I thought of a couple things. One, when we do have a jingle for this, if it's going to be Pat who's going to be unveiling it, I'll probably use, since he's our resident Family Guy expert, I would have the Peter Griffin, like when he hurts his knee and he keeps like yelling, ow, 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 ah, that one, or him falling down the stairs. Either one of those, we could use it for that.
Well, the stairs would be for you.
Stairs will be for me. Yeah. Famous faller down of stairs guy, breaking a rib guy, this guy right here. But yeah, I think I would say that this would not be the game that I would want to throw a right tackle out there for the first time in a season. That's they would have much rather had him break in at some point in the first couple games, but it hasn't worked out that way. And then their Cheetah position, the guy they've been playing there, they've had, at least the fans, at least anyways, and I don't think the coaches would admit this publicly, but fans have had concerns about whether he's sort of athletic enough or quick enough to have that role against really good teams. So, there's options there in terms of things that could be big news for Oklahoma, but I wonder what they're doing over there. Like sometimes things just happen, bad luck with injuries, but to go into a season down that many guys, like what are you out there hitting them with sticks during the camp?
Maybe they're practicing the way that you wanted Tennessee to practice in fall camp.
I did have concerns. I had concerns. I was like, are they ever going to hit each other ever? They've been okay. They hit the ground running. Maybe with the schedule, they were like, we don't need to hit. We'll be all right. We'll just hit a little bit in the games.
On the injury report, the one thing that I was a little surprised by, and we had a question about sort of related to this on the checkerboard Thursday morning, but people were wondering about some of the guys who sat out last week, and the question was specifically about whether players were required to be listed if they sat out the previous week. But I'm a little surprised there's no reference to Cam Seldon or Caleb Herring after those guys missed last week's game. So I would take that as maybe positive news if I'm a Tennessee fan, that there's no mention of Cam Seldon. I know they probably could have, or maybe could have played him last week, but didn't bring him back coming off that injury he suffered in the opener. So that's a positive development. I would say that Cam Seldon is not even included on the injury report right now.
In terms of,
I haven't seen anything about it there being a requirement for players that were on it, right. But it could also be one of those things where last week was a non-conference game, so it's almost like your life on the your availability report life has not yet begun, so therefore you're not tied to what just happened before that. But I might be making that up. Troy Everett, by the way, I did check. He is not a tackle. He played center at App State and played a lot of guard and center for Oklahoma last season. So
my apologies.
Well,
fake news,
Ryan,
Ben.
Well, Ryan, as the resident gambling, as the resident gambling expert here, Gamblehand, as he has been referred to at times in the past, have you seen after the injury report? Was there any movement on the line? Is it still been sitting around 7.5, or has that moved?
I haven't looked at it closely. Last time I saw it was 7. So I would be surprised if there was any movement related to this, since it wasn't anyone significant.
I'm just wondering. If it said Anderson is
Yeah.
probable for Oklahoma and it said Hurd is questionable for Tennessee, I would wonder if that would move it.
It
even
was
half.
already Anderson was already probable in the minds of Oklahoma people prior to the availability report. I'm sure Vegas
Jackson
was
Arnold
well.
was talking. Jackson Arnold was talking like he was coming back earlier this weekend. Something I read on our Oklahoma site.
Yes,
Go ahead.
absolutely. Jackson Arnold practically gave the secret away earlier this week. Wes, to your point, Ryan, I wonder if you agree. I imagine in terms of line shifts, maybe happen Friday night, Saturday morning, as guys are ruled out. Maybe if there's a surprise probable or a surprise doubtful, maybe that changes a line Wednesday, Thursday to Wes's question. But I think you'll see those line shifts maybe later in the week. And something also to remember is these teams probably have a good idea on the availability of most guys well before the availability report even comes out.
Yeah, Vegas knows.
Yep, that's what I was going to say. I mean,
the sharps
and keep in mind that well, Vegas has insiders that help with this kind of stuff too. So that's important to keep in mind when there's a situation like a quarterback being out. That they don't go in blind on calls like that. So they have their ways of information, and it's amazing how little of an advantage you can have on the line, even when you have an idea. Okay, this guy might be out. So that's worth keeping in mind here. This is sort of to protect the idea behind having these injury reports out there is to take away the enticement of a player having inside information about an injury. Like, hey, I know X starting quarterback's going to be out this game. I'm going to have a family member place the bet on this game because I think we can make some money. You're trying to take away that enticement by putting everyone kind of on the same page in theory. So we'll see how much it helps with stuff like that. But yeah, I think Vegas in a lot of cases where there's a big call to be made on like a quarterback usually has inside information or ways of getting that.
Yeah, they do. The safe way to put it normally is that Vegas knows. Like, just generally speaking, they don't make like they didn't get those buildings the way they are by people like making money off of them. Like, if you've ever been to Vegas and you look around, you're like, boy, they've taken a lot of money from a lot of people to sort of build this, right? It was built with mafia money, and then basically since then it's just been expanded with gambling money and stuff. So yeah, I mean, but whatever. I just thought it was interesting because this is a first thing for all of us, right? Like, and since we're recording this on Thursday morning, and since it came out Wednesday night, that was sort of the fresh news about that. So that was interesting. Anyways, we got a lot more stuff to discuss here in the second segment. I think it's interesting. We got some answers from our OU insider about some things Thursday or on this Thursday morning to talk about what he expects this weekend. And I thought there was some really interesting stuff in there, and we'll have some other news and notes about the game, about this weekend, etc. But before we do that, we're going to step away for just a second, pay some bills, listen to some products, services, in-house ads, etc., and then come right back here on the GoVols247 Podcast. #ad. Welcome back to the GoVols247 Podcast, brought to you by whatever products, services, and in-house ads you just heard a moment ago. During that commercial break, Wes Rucker coming to you from Fort Rucker Studio, joined by Ben McKee, Patrick Brown, and Ryan Callahan from their domiciles across the Knoxville region. Got a lot to discuss here on this episode. We're all excited, obviously, about this game this weekend. There's a different kind of buzz, right? So you get into SEC play and things just get a little bit more exciting. Things go up a notch. And this is an interesting one because it's the first game ever in OU history for Oklahoma being an SEC member. I mean, Tennessee's been there recently. I could joke Tennessee's probably been to Oklahoma since the last time it's been to a couple of SEC places. It seems like the way things go these days with the conference sizes. But no matter what, this is a big weekend, and we have a lot to discuss about it. And we will get right back to that after a quick request from our end to please go in there just a second out of your day, if you don't mind, and rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. That would help us out tremendously, whether you're listening on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, anywhere in the world. I'm not going to list them all, but anywhere in the world you can cast the Find Pod, you can find this podcast. We do this for free. We're happy to do it. It's a labor of love. We're also transitioning it to video in different places, getting it to our Facebook page, getting it to our YouTube page. And, please go like that there too. And it's really important, guys, in all these things that you leave reviews. That is the secret sauce to the algorithms right now, has been the reviews. So please leave a fresh review. That gets this out there to more people. It pings them on the things that they like, functions and all that. So that helps us out tremendously. Please go do that. Please also tell people in your life about it. I love hearing from random people how they've heard about this podcast. It's pretty great. And, it was, my family and I went to dinner at a local restaurant last Friday night, and someone came up and started talking about the podcast and where he heard it from a friend. And I love hearing these stories. So if you're already doing all that stuff, keep doing it. Thank you. We love you. If not,
I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Back to business here, guys. We had, I thought it was interesting. I don't know if y'all have had a chance to read it yet, but we do our Better Know a Foe series every week, and talking about different, Tennessee guys, or, who Tennessee's playing, people who know the team. Didn't do one for Kent State. And I think on Saturday you could see why, if I had to put it that way. But this week, obviously, and for the rest of the weeks, the rest of the season, we will have them like normal. And this week, our friends over at OU Insider, Josh Calloway, was able to give us what I thought were some pretty interesting answers. And he said, as someone who knows Oklahoma football pretty darn well, he said he thought it's the most buzz he has felt around town in like at least 10 years for this game. And that's big. Like, you start thinking about some of the times in recent years when Tennessee was starting to get it back going again and had some Florida or Bama or Georgia in town. Like, this is a big deal over there. Like, they're going to be fired up. That for years they heard about the SEC and they hated it. Now they hear about the SEC and they love it. This is a proud fan base. They've won 7 national championships, got some Heisman trophies, a bunch of them. It's a great program, a historic name. And they feel like they belong in this league, and they want to have a party, and they want to start their presence in this league by beating a borderline top 5 team. And that's their plan for this weekend. So I guess I'll start the same way we did the first segment. Ben, Patrick, and Ryan, what are your thoughts on just sort of how big of a game this is and what that atmosphere should be like?
I am deferring to Patrick. I don't want his feelings to get hurt in the second segment, like his feelings got hurt in the first segment. Over here acting like Joey Logano or Bubba Wallace here on the podcast. So Patrick, what are your thoughts on how big of a weekend this is for Oklahoma football?
It sounds like it's their biggest weekend since the last time the Vols came to Norman.
That was a big one.
I mean, Nebraska left the Big 12 years ago, and I guess they probably look at Oklahoma State as little brother. They don't play Texas in Norman, so they probably don't have that many big home games. I mean, you can only bring Kansas State and Kansas and Iowa State and Texas Tech to Norman so many times. I mean, I think they've probably played some big non-conference games there. Didn't they play like Ohio State there several years ago? Am I remembering Oregon? Maybe that was Oregon going to Ohio State. But yeah, I mean, if you don't get a lot of big name programs to your home stadium a lot because one of them, maybe your most traditional rival bailed and went to the Big Ten, and then you play Texas in Dallas. So yeah, I mean that's kind of it makes sense when you think about it and put it in that lens. I think even if Josh Heupel wasn't the head coach at Tennessee, that it would probably still be a pretty big deal. I think it does help that Tennessee is ranked 6th in the country right now and has looked really good. I mean, Texas' first SEC game is next week. They get Mississippi State, so they obviously don't have. They get a nice easy introduction to the league based on how the Bulldogs have looked early this season. But Oklahoma's getting one of the teams that's at least the last couple of seasons been pretty good. So. Yeah, I mean, I think there would be a lot of excitement for this game, and I think they're going to honor Heupel before the game. From what I was listening to Tom Green over at
I imagine they're going to play some sort of video or something, and he'll probably try to not be involved with that. I imagine he doesn't want that emotion.
I don't think they're going to bring him to mid. They're not going to bring him to midfield.
Yeah, he'll be in the locker room.
And we kind of talked about this on our Monday podcast, like he's obviously held in pretty high regard there because they've had Heisman winners and number one picks and great players at quarterback, but he was the one that won a national title. None of Baker Mayfield or any of those other guys did. And he coached a couple of those Heisman winners too. So, he's obviously pretty held in high regard. So I would expect him to get a pretty warm welcome. There's not a big Oklahoma-Tennessee rivalry here. It's not like he, is coaching at, Missouri or A&M or somewhere that they have a little more history with. So, it should be a very raucous environment, and it's going to be on Tennessee to try to not get affected by that and to take that crowd out of the game, because we've all covered some of those games like that, and there's been times in the past where that bubble can get propped pretty quick, and if Tennessee's able to do that, then it makes their job. If they do that early, that makes their job the rest of the night a lot easier.
Yeah, I don't think there's too much to add to what Patrick had to say, Ryan. To me, it's obviously a huge weekend for Oklahoma, and my thought to add on to Patrick is just that if I'm Oklahoma, I want to make a statement. I've been told for forever that I'm not an SEC program, even going back to my Big 12 days, and I've heard nothing about how difficult the SEC is and this and that. And if I'm Oklahoma, I want to make a statement in that regard and assert themselves as a factor in the SEC. I think Texas, although it hasn't necessarily gotten into conference play just yet, I think with the way that Texas manhandled Alabama in the trenches last season in Tuscaloosa, and then also manhandled Michigan in the trenches earlier this season, it looks like Texas is going to be able to adjust to SEC play perfectly fine because of how physical they are up front on both sides of the football. And if I'm Oklahoma, I want to send that same statement. I don't know that Oklahoma is going to be able to do that with its offensive line at the moment, especially against this Tennessee defensive front. But I think Oklahoma's defense and Oklahoma's defensive front is going to fit right in this season. It's just a matter of if that offensive line is ready to make that next step. But I think it's a big game for them in that regard, just trying to solidify and make a statement that they belong in the SEC. This is a statement game for both teams, different reasons, but a statement game for both teams on Saturday night in primetime.
I think it's even simpler than that in some ways. I had a thought on Oklahoma, Tennessee I'll get to in a second, but I think this for both teams is kind of a college football playoff, play-in game in a way, because if Tennessee loses this one, suddenly that Alabama game next month at home, which looks more winnable probably than it did to some people in the offseason. Alabama's been good but not great, but that game becomes a must-win then, because you don't want to go into Georgia in November assuming that you have to win that game to make the college football playoff. So this is a huge game for Tennessee. And for Oklahoma, all you got to look at is what's coming after this. They go to Auburn next week. 2 weeks later, Texas. After that, South Carolina comes to Norman. That's not easy. Then they go to Ole Miss. A couple weeks later, they go to Missouri. After that, Alabama comes to Norman. And then they finish up at LSU. So this is a tone setter for Oklahoma on a brutal schedule. If they lose this game and they lose it by 2 or 3 touchdowns or something like that, then suddenly Oklahoma fans are going to start thinking, oh my gosh, how bad could this season get?
The invasion is coming.
And if they win, then hey, you've got a legit college football playoff opportunity in their minds. So it's a huge game for both teams just because of what it represents, what the rest of the schedule sets up as. And I think a lot of Oklahoma fans went into the game went into the season seeing this as a gettable game when you've got, Alabama, LSU, some of those other teams still down the road. I think they thought this would be a more winnable game. They probably thought Tennessee wouldn't be ranked 6th going into this one. Tennessee's looked pretty good so far. That's only added to the level of difficulty here. So, and then the Josh Heupel factor, which I've kind of wondered this. We had some discussions elsewhere about, which of these two new SEC members might be a bigger rival for Tennessee, and someone floated this out there, and it's got some merit to it. Given sort of the Bruce Pearl angle to Tennessee Auburn basketball, does Tennessee Oklahoma have a chance, since they're going to be playing every other year, to become maybe a similar type of rivalry with, as long as Josh Heupel's there at least, to maybe be sort of an interesting series? These are two teams looking to establish themselves as top tier SEC programs. They could stand, one could stand in the other's way for several years potentially if one were to have the upper hand in this series. So I wonder if this has some rivalry potential as Oklahoma settles into the SEC.
I think it does, but so much of that comes down to at the beginning, I think, how the games go.
Yeah.
Like if one team blows one out this season, another one blows another, the other one out in a year or two, like, we'll see. But like if you get like a couple of banger games early on, and there's, it's just a close game in the fourth quarter, and there's some controversial calls, and there's like a weird targeting ejection, or some personal foul penalties, or something that looked like it should be overturned and it isn't, or if you get any of that kind of squirrely stuff going on, then maybe it does speed its way into a rivalry. Or maybe if Heupel goes there, and if Tennessee wins by a lot on Saturday, maybe all of a sudden that takes the shine off of how much they love Josh Heupel right now, and they're like, oh, now he's that bleep who coaches the other team and came in here and beat us by 20 or whatever. That would change things, I would think, pretty quickly. But I'm definitely interested in that, because I think there's a lot of emotion there for him. There has to be. I don't know any other way around it. Like, we all think of college, right, as years where like we met people who became our friends for life. Like college is a place where you live away from home for the first time, and you kind of start to figure out who you are as a person, and the people that you're around then. Oftentimes, I got lucky, I had a great high school class, and those are still friends for life. We just had a great group of people there. But a lot of people come from high school and they're like, yeah, like those, they don't keep up with them, but their college friends, they do. And so Heupel, I mean, a whole lot of people in his wedding, like a huge chunk of the people at his wedding are people that he met in Norman. And that's a huge part of his life. There's no way it's not a big deal.
It goes beyond college. It goes beyond college too, because 10 of his first 11 years of his coaching,
kids born there.
10 of his first 11 years of his coaching career came at Oklahoma. So, not just college, but early adult life, settling into this business. He probably thought he was going to be at Oklahoma a long time when he was there as offensive coordinator. So
that's what they do over there.
Yeah. So he's got not just the playing time, but a ton of history. And as he said, it's going to be probably weird for him being on the opposite sideline, just because he spent more Saturdays there as a coach than he did as a player, and just going through the routine of being there as a coach. He might be tempted to walk in the wrong locker room when he gets there Saturday. He did sort of acknowledge that a little bit more Wednesday night on Vol Calls, talking about, he might allow himself a moment, whether it's when he walks into the stadium or drives to the stadium or gets in the locker room or whatever, to sort of allow himself to think about that history a little bit. But he said the rest of the day, it's all football. So that it was good to hear him sort of acknowledge the human side of that, because it is unavoidable, as much as he doesn't want to talk about it, that he's going to have some feelings about this. But he's going to do his best to stay focused on what's at hand, and he knows how important this game is for Tennessee. So he's done his best to not let that be a big story, but it's definitely part of the storyline. It's something that I'm sure is going to cross his mind at some point Saturday.
And I think he and this team have handled this week and all the conversation and the hype of this game. I think they've handled it absolutely flawlessly. I think they've embraced it. I think they've also, on top of embracing it, I think they've said the right things. And I truly believe that they have the mentality of it's Tennessee versus Tennessee. It's us versus us, me versus me, whatever way they want to phrase it. I truly believe that they are buying into that mindset. And that is the mindset you have to have in this football game, that if we handle our business, we will be perfectly fine. And it does not matter what Oklahoma does. I don't think that they're going to get caught up in the moment. I do think, Ryan, like to your point and what Heupel was talking about on Vol Calls, like I think that he will take a moment to appreciate the unique, which is what he has called it all week, situation that he is walking into. But I think Patrick, by the time kickoff rolls around and he's ready to run out of the locker room, or even before that, during warmups, his pregame speech in the locker room, running out of the tunnel, the coin toss, I'm sure he'll have to talk to Holly Rowe right before kickoff as the kickoff teams are on the field ready to kick it off. And his offense is taking the field for the first time.
She better not ask him an emotional question then. She better not do that. Holly won't do that, I don't think. But maybe
I think she wouldn't be doing her job if she didn't, though, right?
I
mean, you hear what's it like right now, being in this moment, and he'll probably say, "I'm ready to go play coach this game."
I think he's going to be a stone cold killer.
Yep, that's what he was referenced in the wonderful story by our good friend Chris Lowe. He was referenced by someone else in the business as a stone cold killer. I got to think he wishes this game was a nooner, though. Like that gives you less time. Like he's gonna be sitting there, like just throughout the day trying to watch film, keep himself busy. Watch other games early on in the day, and he's just kind of sitting around. And Norman, I got to think that's he'd rather this just be one of those get up and play days.
Another thing he mentioned this in passing on Vol calls too, but being back home, he's gonna have a lot of family at the game, and this isn't the first game he's played since then, but he mentioned that his mother passed away just earlier this year. So, you wonder on a day like this, does that kind of thing come to mind? So I'm sure there will be some emotions there, being back at Oklahoma, for the first time without his mom. So there's some things about this that, make it unavoidably emotional, but knowing him, he's such a fierce competitor. He's going to be focused on that first and foremost. And any emotions he shows or feels, I think will be kept within pretty well, or he'll kind of keep those moments behind closed doors.
The last thing I've got,
somebody
guys,
say or write that his dad still lives in the area? Did I hear that correctly?
I believe that's right. I know he mentioned he has some family, basically in the area or in Oklahoma. So yeah, that's definitely another aspect of this and why he'll have so many people there for this game.
God, if his parents retired and moved from South Dakota, wouldn't you think they'd rather live in East Tennessee than in Central Oklahoma? I'm just spitballing here. I know.
I would rather live East Tennessee than Oklahoma.
I don't want to be rude or anything, but it just seems to me like that's what I would.
Maybe you like flat land.
Yeah, it's true. Maybe they see hills and they're like, I don't like that. I don't like walking up and down hills. I understand.
Maybe it's just really cold in South Dakota.
But the last thing I've got. Sure. Well, no, I was talking about, but like maybe they like winter, maybe they like cold, so they like those Oklahoma winters where it's like barren and yuck. I don't know. There's I've said it before, I've said it again. That's in the part of the country where there's two seasons: balls hot, balls cold. That's the two seasons that you get in that part of the country normally, and it will still be hot. It'll be in the 90s during the day on Saturday, and then should cool off a little bit at night, but not too much. It is going to be warm and humid and all of that. My last thing, unless you all have more, which is fine, where are we going today? It's a Thursday morning. But I think one thing that I keep thinking about in my head about this week, and to me, it's like one of the biggest plots of the game, for me at least. How aggressive will they be with Nico? That's because Venables is an aggressive guy, but you don't always do that against Tennessee. What do y'all think? Y'all start the conversation and we'll wrap it up. Ben, how aggressive do you think they'll be with him?
How aggressive will Tennessee be, or how aggressive will Oklahoma be? Because I think Venables will be very aggressive to your point, and it's something that I am fascinated to see how it plays out. I mentioned this on the Swain event this week, but there's been some trends in the NFL that we saw very similar to the NC State game, where teams are dropping a lot in coverage, playing too high more often than ever through the first 2 weeks of the NFL season. It's the fewest touchdown passes ever thrown, I believe it is. Dan Orlovsky tweeted out the stats early Thursday morning. And I believe he said it's the fewest touchdown passes ever thrown through the first 2 weeks of the season. Blitz rates are down. Like teams are not being as aggressive. They're dropping in coverage. They're not allowing all these arm talents that exist today. And maybe it is quarterback play being down in the NFL, but it feels like there's a good enough amount of arm talent in the NFL, but teams aren't wanting them to beat them over the top as much as maybe we've seen the past couple of years. And I think we've seen that in college as well. We saw it in the NC State game. But Venables seems like that old school defensive coach that still wants to get after the quarterback and be aggressive. So I wonder if he's going to be the opposite of that trend that we're kind of seeing in football. And I realize college is different than in the NFL, but I do think we are seeing that trend with facing Tennessee's offense, which is why I bring it up, of teams dropping in coverage. We saw it with Joe Milton last year. Teams didn't want Joe's big arm to beat them over the top, and you saw it early this season with Nico's arm as well. So I'm fascinated to see how Oklahoma defends Nico in that regard. In terms of how aggressive Tennessee is, I don't think that they should be reckless is the way that I would describe it. They should be aggressive with Nico. Nico's talented enough to be aggressive even in his fifth career start in this type of environment. I think he can handle it in terms of playmaking ability and IQ wise. So I think they should still treat it like any other game, quite frankly, and be aggressive with him when they see fit, but just don't be reckless. And I think I brought that up on Tuesday's or Monday's podcast of I wonder if like Heupel emotionally will be fine in this football game, but in terms of trying to stick it to Oklahoma, in terms of trying to be that stone cold killer, does he try to do too much on the field, X's and O's wise, and maybe force a play here or there that doesn't need to be forced within that moment? That's more of my question that I'm kind of pondering going into this weekend.
Ben, it's interesting you bring up the too high safety stuff. I think it was the legendary Mel Kiper went as far. He had a hot take apparently this morning. It's on social media that the NFL should ban too high safety looks.
Oh wow!
Like what? Like how do you? I mean, what? I don't know. I mean, I get what he's trying to say.
I mean, zone defenses are illegal in the NBA, right? So
no, they're not. You can play zone. You just have to.
Certain ways
you can't sit a guy in the
alone.
lane.
Right.
You can't sit a guy in the lane unless he's guarding somebody. The defensive 3-second rule is you can play zone and it's usually a junk defense when you can't do anything else. And a lot of times NBA teams are like, what the hell is this? It takes them a couple of possessions to figure out how to play against it. But I think PFF has Oklahoma's blitz rate through the first 3 games is about 50%, which is pretty high. I mean, Tennessee is with Banks is 30 to 40 generally, if I'm remembering correctly. So, I mean, and that's always what I associated with a Venables defense, particularly when he was at Clemson. Is just they're bringing people from all different ways. That doesn't mean that, a blitz rate doesn't mean that they're bringing 6 and 7 every time. And it's, the old school NCAA football all out blitz play, but
monster blitz.
Might bring a linebacker, might, drop a defensive end, things like that. And they've got some guys up front that they don't necessarily need to blitz a whole lot, but that's just sort of the MO. And I do think there were a couple plays against NC State where the Wolfpack brought some pressure in. It made Nico maybe rush a throw or two. I'm thinking early in the game, the throw he missed to Brew on the opening possession just a little bit, the red zone throw that he got out a little quick to squirrel. It's open, it's wide open, should be an easy throw, but just a little bit of pressure in the pocket collapsing a little bit, got him a little bit sped up, probably as much as we see Nico get sped up. So I wonder if you see that. And I wonder if you say, hey, look at the last 2 games, Tennessee's receivers haven't exactly made a bunch of huge plays. I mean, there's been some here and there, but I wonder if you say, hey, we're going to take our chances defending these guys and we're going to try to stop the run and make those guys make plays. Could see that. And I don't think if Oklahoma can't stop the run, Oklahoma's got no shot at winning this game, as it is for most Tennessee opponents. For Tennessee, I wonder if this is the game where we see Nico run a little bit more intentionally. They haven't really done that a whole lot. Nico has said in the past he's not a run-first quarterback, but shoot, man, when he gets out there in the open field, his strides, he can go quickly and he's deceptively fast because he's got those long legs that take up a bunch of yards. It kind of messes with pursuit angles of defenders. We've seen that on a couple of his scrambles, but I wonder if this is the game where you maybe see a little bit more power, draw, things like that, to try to be that extra number or give a wrinkle. I mean, I think this will be a pretty standard, game for Tennessee. They're going to come in and do what they do. They're going to have wrinkles. They're going to have little creative things that they've broken out of the playbook for this game plan. And they're going to try to, they'll try to dictate formation, dictate alignment with formations and attack weaknesses and things like that. So, and they've got different ways to go about it too. Now that we've seen in the past 2 weeks, they played a ton of 12 personnel and then they broke out a 4 receiver set. So they've got different ways to go at you and different ways to beat you. And, I think Oklahoma's defense is pretty good. I think Oklahoma's defense is good enough to give Tennessee some fits and keep Oklahoma in the game. Can they make the game-changing kind of turnover plays to flip field position or set up an easy score? Can they do that? And can they hold on long enough? Because I could see this game kind of playing out like Oklahoma's defense makes some stops early on and kind of keeps the Sooners in the game. But eventually, a lot of times this offense, more often than not, is inevitable. It's going to eventually start putting points on the board and scoring touchdowns. And I just don't know if Oklahoma has what they need on offense, particularly up front, to handle Tennessee's defensive line. And, maybe having some of those receivers come back will help Jackson Arnold. They haven't really been lighting up in the passing game either. But if he's got some of his guys back, he's going to be more confident. Maybe the offense, maybe the coordinator feels more confident about dialing up some pass plays. But I have a hard time seeing Oklahoma score a lot in this game unless they get some turnovers and short fields and things like that. Because I think Tennessee's defensive line. I mean, we kind of saw this, right? We saw this 2 weeks ago when NC State had a suspect offensive line. We saw how that went for them against the Tennessee defensive line. Oklahoma's got some issues up front. Could we see a repeat? If it does, then I think Tennessee's got a great shot at leaving Norman with a win.
I would agree with all that. I will say, I still want to see Tennessee do it defensively, even against a good team in a tough environment. I can't help remembering Tennessee kind of lose its composure at Florida last year, and defensively, some of the issues showed up as much as on offense. So you've got to show you can do it against a good team. I think Tennessee is the better team in that matchup, and they should control the line of scrimmage because, again, Oklahoma's offensive line is graded out a bit shaky so far and obviously had to be patched up this offseason, so that you would think that's a strength against a weakness a little bit for Tennessee against Oklahoma. So there are reasons to feel good about Tennessee's chances in this game. But, yeah, knowing Brent Venables' sort of MO over the years, I'd be surprised if he doesn't bring a good bit of pressure on Nico. But, yeah, how he does it and how frequently and where it comes from, that's what'll be interesting to me, because I think they want to confuse him, as you usually do with young quarterbacks. And that at the same time, Ben raises a good point about what sort of slowed Tennessee's passing game, or at least kept it in check a little bit against NC State, dropping that many guys in coverage. It's an interesting idea. And if you felt you could do that in a way and defend the run well, that would be a good way of approaching this game, probably, because I think you do want to make Nico beat you with his arm. And like Patrick said, I think Nico will run more in this game. I think Tennessee, whether it's design runs or just more of a willingness to tuck it and run, I'll be surprised if he doesn't have double-digit carries in this game. So I think you're going to see more of that, and he'll be more of a factor with his legs. So, yeah, if I'm Oklahoma, I want Nico to have to beat me with his arm, because at least since halftime of the Chattanooga game, the numbers are a little more pedestrian when you look at Tennessee's passing game production. A couple interceptions against NC State. They didn't have to throw it a whole lot against Kent State. So, how much can they just make Nico make throws on 3rd and 8 and 3rd and 7, plays like that? So, and even obviously getting them in long yard situations. But that goes back to what Brent Venables said this week about Tennessee's offensive line. If Tennessee's offensive line is that good, he really hyped them up. If they're that good that they have an easier time running the ball than I would expect against Oklahoma, then it's going to be hard for Oklahoma to win this game. But, yeah, knowing Brent Venables, he's going to be aggressive going after Nico. And I think this is one of those big games for Tennessee. Whatever you've got in the playbook for Nico, you're not holding anything back in this game. You're just trying to make it manageable for him. Going on the road the first time, the biggest thing is you want him to not get in over his head and be in some situations where he starts questioning everything and just loses his composure. And you don't see that from Nico, so there's no reason to expect that, but you just never know sometimes how guys are going to react the first time they're thrown into that situation. And one other thought, just the sort of all of this plays into this, but we see this all the time when you see a Nick Saban going against a Kirby Smart or someone like that. Brent Venables and Josh Heupel know each other really well. Are there some tendencies that they're aware of each other's games and the way they call a game that could play into this? Does Brent Venables sort of have the book on Josh Heupel in a way that forces Tennessee to adjust early, or vice versa?
And Halsley too, for that matter. Halsley knows him a decent bit.
Absolutely. So the chess match of this could be fascinating, because those guys have certainly spent a lot of years together, and they've seen games where other teams have had success against one another. So against those guys. So what do they know about each other, about how to attack them, and can Josh Heupel, for instance, if he knows Brent Venables knows this about games that they've struggled, could he have a counter set up to sort of play off that? Like that, coaches' familiarity with one another is an interesting aspect of these types of matchups. So how much does that play in, and who can sort of get the better of one another in that chess match? Yeah,
I think that Venables is one of those guys who it's kind of like, I'm not there. I'll say it reminds me of John Chavis a little bit, in that you knew there were certain tendencies over a certain amount of time as a coach, like that he wants to attack. He is going to attack early. He is going to throw some wrinkles early. at Nico and see how he responds. I bet he has a fallback plan. Like if they get burned a couple times early, you're going to see more too high. I bet. I mean, they're not stupid. Like even teams that don't like going too high go too high against Tennessee sometimes because that's how you contain this offense. You can't let it get it going downhill on you. But we also know tendencies that, especially on the road, all games, but really on the road too, Heupel likes early shot plays. There's something that they've drawn up that I would imagine that they've got 2 or 3 different contingencies to where they're going to say, okay, if we see this look on the first possession, here's the shot play. If we see this look on the first possession, here's the shot play. Or if we see this look on the first possession, here's the shot play. Unless they get too like stuffed twice on runs early or something, and they're in 3rd and 9 or 3rd and 8, I would imagine in the first few plays, first handful of plays, they're going to have a shot downfield. That they just, if you get there in that early environment and you throw the first punch, that is so important. And I think
it's the script too. First drives are a lot of scripted a lot of times, and that's why we've seen Tennessee score on their opening series a lot of times just because of what they sketch out during the week. I don't know that they have one for like, okay, if we see this look, we're going to go to this or that. But they might. I mean, Tennessee's first quarter scoring averages and totals under Heupel have been pretty. I mean, they're one of the best first quarter teams in college football over that span. So it's shot plays. It's, I don't think they break out the wrinkles till later, but certainly they've been really good in those scripted sequences where they can kind of get down the field quickly and strike first.
Yeah, and it reminds me like the wrinkles sometimes like in the NC State game where those guys spent the entire summer parts of it looking at Tennessee stuff specifically because the first couple games they're like, yeah, we'll probably win those games. And they did. Barely in one of them, but they won it, and they were spending a lot of time on Tennessee and this offense and what to do. And then for like half the game, Tennessee's in 12 personnel, and they're like, guys, what the hell? Like after the game, Dorm coaches hate admitting this stuff, but after the game, Dorm was like, we were not ready for that, and we had to adjust really quickly. So I don't know if that would happen because these guys know each other that well, but I guess you never know.
That's kind of how it goes. I mean, Tony Gibson. Go ahead, Ryan. The floor is yours.
I was just gonna say, knowing that Tennessee sort of unveiled some different things in a couple games here. They've had some 4 wide stuff. They've had some 2 tight end stuff. What will there be a different one this week? They made sure to get the onside kick out there on tape to some people's chagrin. Last week. So what's that all setting up? There probably is something sort of spinning off that tight end.
What's your game here? What's your game?
So, but I'm watching the tight ends in this game. Nico's throwing a touchdown pass to a tight end in each of his starts. I think this might be an important game for those guys in the passing game. If Oklahoma, goes to great lengths to keep Tennessee's passing game from getting downfield, this could be a game where Miles Kitselman or Ethan Davis or Holden Stays needs to make a play in a big spot, and we've seen Nico kind of use them as his security blanket.
I'm gonna get Ben involved. He's been too quiet for too long. Plus, I think he thinks I hate him now because of some things I said earlier in the podcast. So, Ben, what would you like to add?
I would like to add nothing. I think we have all hit the nail on the head with this football game. I could never hate you, Patrick.
I sense drama on the right side of the screen.
No surprise.
No, there's no drama.
That you sense drama. You and Ryan love to live
feed off drama.
Yep.
Here we go.
Which hopefully Ryan doesn't get mad at me for saying this, like he got mad at me a podcast ago that I had to force Wes to cut something out. But funny how Ben and Patrick are on the right here, and Wes and Ryan are on the left. A political thread, delete.
Delete.
Control, delete. Command
delete,
Q, Apple Q.
I don't do politics for what it's worth. We love to joke about politics in our group chat, so that's where that stems from. But with this football game, that has nothing to do with politics. Yes, thank goodness it doesn't. Although Toby Keith will be blaring over the speakers at Oklahoma Stadium.
He'll be taking some terrorist ass after the third quarter.
Yeah,
I'll take a video of Wes to see how his reaction to it. and put it out for
He'll be.
social
We
media.
know he'll be sitting down for it.
That's right.
We do know that
Yeah.
Wes will be sitting.
Good old
all right.
falsehoods that you've never
All
done.
right, we're running too long when we start to get this delusional, but no, I think all of us have hit the nail on the head about the important areas of this football game. To me, Tennessee, its defensive front has to set the tone. Amari Thomas said it perfectly earlier this week that they want to be a team that wins in these environments, wins on the road, and it starts with the defense helping the offense take the momentum and energy out of the stadium. And to me, that Oklahoma offensive line is just not in a good spot right now. And a very talented defensive front that has a lot of depth and talent needs to take advantage of that. And that has to be what sets the tone in this game. Tennessee has to win the turnover margin. I guess it doesn't have to win the turnover margin. It could lose it by a turnover and still technically win. But my point is that Tennessee can't go in there and start coughing up the football, because Oklahoma's defense does do a good job of forcing turnovers. And I believe last year they won the turnover margin in 10 games, or I don't have the stats right in front of me, but there are a lot of gaudy stats in Oklahoma's favor when it comes to turnovers and points off of turnovers and their record when winning the turnover margin. So Tennessee's going to have to make sure they take care of the football and protect Nico in this game. Tennessee's offensive line, big game for them against a really good Oklahoma defense, and they have to set the tone on that side of the football as well. So I'm fascinated to see how it plays out. I'm pretty confident in Tennessee's chances going into this football game. I would be a bit surprised if Tennessee loses, quite frankly, and I don't think it's the end of the week that is forcing me to say this as we are getting closer and closer to kickoff. I think a lot of these matchups really favor Tennessee. And I think when you break it down and you kind of compare position to position on both sides of the football, I think a lot of them favor Tennessee. Really, the best thing that Oklahoma has in its favor is the fact that it's a home game, quite frankly. And I'm not suggesting that Oklahoma is a bad football team. I just think that Tennessee is the better football team.
Yeah, Ben, I would agree. I think the matchups here largely – I will, since your internet is 5 seconds behind your mid-2000s internet. Anyways, the matchups here, and the big matchup is that defensive line, because if you can control a game like we saw Tennessee's defensive line do against NC State, you make an offense one-dimensional. Oklahoma, their running game hasn't been great. I think Jackson Arnold is their leading rusher. To me, that's the two kind of new equalizers in this game. One of them is Jackson Arnold just running around making a bunch of plays, which he's capable of doing. I think it's key and that they get him a little rattled, maybe an early interception, hit him early. If they let him start hot like they did Spencer Rattler a couple years ago, I think Jackson Arnold is talented enough to kind of hit that zone and be really tough to beat. But if they get him into, hit him a couple times early and kind of, deter him from running, or get him in the pocket a couple times and get some sacks, get a turnover, what have you. I think that's a big key for Tennessee. And the other equalizer is the crowd. And I want to, I probably will pick Tennessee to win this game. I will probably pick them to cover, but there's just like in the back of my head, there's all the games. There's Athens and the Columbias and the second half at Alabama last season and Florida, for eternity, where I'm like, Tennessee could go there and just get stage fright and shrink in the moment, and Oklahoma is the aggressor, and Oklahoma takes it, rides the crowd and outplays Tennessee and wins. That's the big in the back of my head. But this is a different team. This is a different cast of characters. You got a different leader of the offense with Nico. You've got older guys defensively, and I don't know if it we'll see if it pays off, but. I think this program is well aware, as someone I alluded to and Ben touched on it, like they need to win on the road to kind of take that next step. Because I remember back in March sitting outside or when they're after the close practice and they're piping in crowd noise. I'm like, do they normally do this in spring? I don't feel like this is normal. I think that's been such an emphasis for so much of the offseason based on how Tennessee played on the road over the last season and even late in 2022. That everyone in this program has to sort of prepare and train themselves. And, playing on the road a lot of times is about mindset and fortitude, and Tennessee has lacked fortitude a lot of times going on the road. And so I think they've been trying to intentionally build that over the offseason, and now they get their first chance to put that to the test and see if they're ready for such a stage and to go play away from home like they do at home, where they're 20-4 and Neyland is a fortress, and they don't want to have happen what happens to other teams at Neyland happen to them on the road. They need to stop that if they're going to be a serious contender for the playoff and in the SEC.
Yeah, last thing I've got is that when I look at that all offseason, I said Oklahoma would win this game. I was adamant about it. I said, this is the first SEC game in their history. There's a lot going on. Their offense hasn't been great on the road. It'll be Nico's first road start. I've said that for months, and I've stood by it. And now you sit here and watch Tennessee's defensive line on tape, and you watch Oklahoma's offensive line on tape, and you go, I don't know how I can not change my pick at that point. So I'm leaning that way to changing it, but I don't know for sure. Got to man up, cowboy up at some point tonight and do that. But I think for me, I still do have questions about Tennessee's secondary, and if Oklahoma does not protect Arnold, that won't matter. If Oklahoma does protect Arnold, or if Arnold's able to break the pocket and kind of extend plays like Mayfield did last time these teams played, then that could be a problem still. I still think there are questions. Maybe that's unfair. I still have questions about the back end of the secondary. And my very last point is I think this would be a good game for Brew McCoy to reemerge. He had a big performance in the opener, like 6 for 89 and a touchdown, and had like a 10-yard rush or something. And then the past 2 games, he's had, I think, a total of 2 catches, 19 yards. I think this would be a good time for Brew McCoy to pop back up and have a big Brew McCoy game on the road. He's a team leader. They all look to him. This would be a good moment for him to kind of step up and make some big catches. I think he will on Saturday.
Yeah, I wonder if this is a game that's going to come down to maybe not come down to, but where special teams are going to be a big factor. We've not seen Tennessee really be tested there. Jackson Ross has barely punted. Tennessee's returners have shown some flashes. Maybe one of those guys makes a play, and Max Gilbert's gotten some valuable experience that might really be a big deal in a game like this. So we'll see if that ends up being more of a factor. But I think they'll probably need Jackson
it might be.
Ross to be good in this game.
I think so too. And I think we're going to need to get Ryan a new modem, and we'll go work on that here. It's September for everybody, right? This isn't baseball, and it's September. We're not in mid-season form yet, but we've had a lot to discuss. I think we've hit pretty much every nail that we needed to hit in this episode. I think that we're still trying to get something from our friends at Sooners Illustrated. Apologies for not saying your name properly earlier in this podcast, guys. I got used to us having the different Oklahoma site. Now we got the one we got now. But Sooners Illustrated is the place where you can go see our friend Mr. Callaway and all those guys. And we'll hopefully get one of those guys on for a quick podcast before the game. But if not, then we'll see you after the game on Saturday night. That might be Ben and Ryan doing that podcast. Maybe we had discussed that a little bit, depending on what the travel situation is, because I think Pat and I got to get to the airport at like 4:30 a.m. or something on Sunday after that flight.
I got to go watch the Bristol race after I finish my work. That's what I got to do.
Yeah, there you go. So you got to do that, and then I think the game ends, and it's going to be. We might sleep a couple hours on the plane on the way back, but that's the way the travel schedule works. So it might be those guys on that one, but you'll probably hear from us before then, anyways. But regardless, you've heard from us now. So unless if you're listening on the audio stream, then you'll hear the outro at the end of this. If you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook or wherever you're watching, then you won't. So for everybody out there, thanks for listening, guys. And Ben, Pat, and Ryan, appreciate you being here, fellas.
Thanks, Wes.